second jihad, okay? So first jihad is, the Arabian Peninsula. Second jihad is the rest of that, all right, which is a lot, okay? Islam is not a religion of peace, never was, never will be. They're a religion of conquest, and they will conquer by whatever means they can, okay? If they need to lie to do it, they'll lie to do it. Their current method right now, there's many people that talk about this, been talking about it for about 10 or 15 years. What's in progress right now is what they call the third jihad, which is conquest by birthright and not by the sword. Which, by the way, we're now at least 10 years, or almost 15 years past it since I first started hearing about it. And Europe is seeing the realization of that, right? Europe is very quickly becoming Muslim. And it's not because they're being conquered by Muslims, it's because they're being outborn by Muslims, right? Standard Europeans are not even having enough kids to replace themselves, and Muslims are having like 7 or 8 kids. Not only that, the Muslim men are strongly encouraged to marry outside of their religion so that they can force convert those women to being Muslim, right? Because you're either going to convert or I'm going to beat you. That's how Islam works. So, if you ever have anyone in your family that decides they want to date a Muslim, tell them no. It's a very bad idea, okay? It's a very bad idea. Don't do that, okay? So, Charlemagne, his empire, Charlemagne was extremely devoted to the Roman Catholic Church. Remember, by this time that we're talking about, by the time of Charlemagne, we're dealing with the full-fledged Roman Catholic Church now, okay? This is no longer New Testament Christianity with salvation by faith, right? By grace through faith. This is now salvation by infant baptism. This is now salvation by partaking in the Lord's Supper. This is now salvation through confession and last rites. A lot of the mechanics that are currently in place today are in place by this time in what I am referring to as the church. There is an argument that somewhere in the midst of all that big old blob of Roman Catholic Europe, there's a small group of believers that's still there somewhere, right? There's just not a lot of proof to back that up, okay? Also, we're getting to the point now where we've already got a fully developed purgatory idea going on. We're starting to work on selling indulgences, which are little get-out-of-purgatory free cards that if you give enough money to the church, you would get, okay? So, yeah, we've come a long ways from New Testament Christianity to the current state of the church, right? Or the Roman Catholic Church. Any questions about any of that so far?
So, do they have a pope now, or are they still bishops?
No, yeah, they're popes now. By the time Charlemagne comes, it's the pope. And in fact, Charlemagne's successor, Pippin, remember Pippin the Short? Some about French people and shortness, you know that? Although, fun fact, Napoleon wasn't short. Napoleon was like 6 foot tall, which was really tall for his time. It's all the British cartoons that made him out to be short. So, but anyways, Pippin the Short, he would go and save the Papal State, which existed at this time. So the Papal State still exists today, is its own little piece in Rome that it is a nation that is run by the Pope, right? It is its own nation. The Papal State is its own thing.
Italy doesn't have anything to do with it?
I don't, as of today, they do not have jurisdiction over the Papal State. The Papal State is its own thing, I believe. Certainly during this time, the Papal State is absolutely its own thing. Remember, you looked up there was a secondary piece of land that was owned by the Papal State over here called Avignon, right? So, French, Pope, and Papal State are very closely put together here, okay? The reason for that is because Charlemagne's empire is French, right? It's a Frankish empire. It's before they're called French, but they're called Frank, same thing. Again, Pippin the Short, he goes and he saves the Papal State from an army that was coming up from down here, the Lombards. They were coming up here to march and try to take out Rome. And Pippin put together an army, went down there and met them, beat them, and then it's a really big moment for the Pope. The Pope takes the crown and puts it on Pippin the Short's head. And from then until Napoleon, that was the thing. If there was a new Pope, you were crowned by the Pope, right? I'm sorry, if there was a new king, you were crowned by the Pope, okay? Which is, of course, totally symbolic of the kings bowing down to the Pope, right? So the church By the time we get to the calling of the First Crusade, man, the Pope is more powerful than any king in Europe. And he's going to demonstrate that by when he calls the First Crusade, what is going to happen. Okay? So,
I have another question.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, go for it.
I missed last week.
no, you're good.
What is going on with Constantinople? Are they separate?
Yeah, so
They're still separate?
yeah, they're still separate. And so you have Charlemagne's Empire, which, do you have the picture of Charlemagne's Empire still, Dakota? It's really big. It goes into middle of Germany, yeah. See, that's pretty big for an empire at the time, okay? That's Charlemagne's Empire. Constantinople, so what happened last week we talked about was Islam shows up. And Islam is now facing, Constantinople is now barely hanging on. By the time we get to 1054, which is the First Crusade, Muslim armies are besieging Constantinople. They just have not been able to retake it. They have not been able to take it yet. Okay, so Constantinople down here is still serving as the giant bottleneck, keeping Muslim hordes from coming into Eastern Europe. Right? And another thing, the reason why it's so important is because this is the only way you can go through there without getting on a boat. And they still make Italy and Venice and France, like the Muslims did not have control of the Mediterranean. So they could not get on ships and just sail across and start conquering that way. They didn't have control of the ocean. So, yeah, so good question. Constantinople is barely hanging on. Yeah. Okay, any other questions leading up to this time?
Last week I asked you about Ishmael.
Ishmael, yeah.
So, and you said that Muhammad said he was the only true, whatever. So does Ishmael have anything to do with Islam other than what Muhammad said?
He is their Abraham.
Well, I know that, but does he know that he's the right person?
Does Ishmael know? No, Ishmael would have been
So he
dead
could be
for...
sitting in heaven, and
Mhm.
all these other people would be down there,
Yes,
so it stinks to be them.
yes. That's
Okay, so he has no idea.
No, Ishmael died...
That's what I thought, but.
Ishmael would have died probably 2,000 years before Muhammad ever showed up. Yeah. Which, if you think about that, that's as far removed as we are from Jesus. Right? That's a lot of time.
But
Okay?
Jesus knows what I.
That's true. Ishmael is not
He
that.
has no idea.
That's fair. Okay. All right. Another big thing that shows up with Charlemagne's Empire as it falls apart, you have the Holy Roman Empire. 3 things I want to tell you about the Holy Roman Empire. What were they?
They're not holy, they're not Roman, they're not empire-ish or something.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The Holy Roman Empire is neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. It's a confederation of German states. Yes?
No, I'm sorry, I want to go back to this thing with Isaac and Ishmael.
Yes.
In the scriptures, God said that he would also make Ishmael a big nation.
Yes.
Is that the Muslim nation today?
I don't think so. I don't think that God would have any part in what Islam is today.
When was he a big nation like with the Jews?
I don't know. I'd have to go track down his line. But if you do take that stance that Islam is the nation of Ishmael, then they're way bigger than the Jews.
To the Jews.
Way bigger.
But that's what the scriptures say, I will also make a big nation out of him. So I don't see it in history at all.
Yeah. Well, we have to track where his people go, right? It might be the Babylonians or something like that, you know. But either way, if it is a reference to Islam, you're talking about a nation that wouldn't show up until 2,000 years plus after his death.
Right.
So that's, you know,
Pushing it.
yeah, that's pushing it. Yeah. Okay, so in 1054 AD, this is the height of the papal church, of the Pope. Okay, 1054 AD, Pope Urban II is receiving pleas for help from the emperor at Constantinople. Okay, and he is asking for help because these Muslim armies are constantly taking his land, beating him in battle. The capital itself has been under siege several times by this point. Also, there are rumors of Christian pilgrims. Of course, they say these are rumors. They're probably true just because we know they still do this today if they're not kept in check. But Christians, they would make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem to go see the to go see Calvary and all, just like people today still go to Israel and go look at the places where Jesus was, right? One of the big reasons for the Crusades was the rumors of the Muslims capturing these Christians and either holding them ransom or martyring them while they were there, right? Not just martyring them, but like dragging them through the streets and martyring them, like complete humiliation and stuff. Again, the history books will say, well, these were just rumors, it's not verified, but they still kind of do the same thing today if they're given the chance to over there, right? Like, you're not going to go to the middle of the Arabian Peninsula, Iran, Iraq, or anything like that. But hey guys, I'm a Christian. I'm here to go see where Jesus walked. How's that? You know, you can't share the gospel there even today. It's called the 1040 window. Evangelism is illegal there. So it's a big problem. Anyway, so Pope Urban II is going to call a crusade, and this is a new idea. And remember, pull up our Islam map again, if you don't mind, go to. So by 750, all of this, which used to be Christian, remember we have a massive Christian presence here, massive Christian presence here. By 750 AD, all of this had been lost to Islam. Okay, there's virtually no, very little to no record of Christianity existing after 750 AD in those areas. Right, it's little bitty cloisters that are hidden real well. And the reason why they're hidden is because if they're discovered, they're killed. Okay? So all of this land had been lost by 750. 1054 puts us at 290 years later. And keep in mind, they still keep trying to push this way, right? So by the time the Pope gets ready to call the crusade, the rest of Turkey is lost. Right? And now we're besieging Constantinople right here. And the Europeans are smart enough to know that, hey, if they get through right here, there's a whole big problem right there. They're in Europe. They're knocking on our doorstep. And the Christian nations that are up there, that are formed and are forming, such as England and France and this Holy Roman Empire that we're talking about, those nations have heard and they have seen what's happened to Christianity down there. And they're also hearing about what's going on in Spain as well, right? So, long story short, the Pope calls a crusade, which is a military call for the kings of Europe to lay down their arms, stop fighting each other, and go fight the infidels, which are Muslims in the Holy Land. Okay? Lots of reasons for doing this. Some of them are political, absolutely. Some of them are just for power, absolutely. Is the Pope a corrupt person? Absolutely. But long story short, England and France have been killing each other as they have done for most of history, right? And when the Pope issues this call, they lay down their arms. They stop fighting each other, they assemble armies, and they decide to go start the long trek all the way down to here. Okay? Yep, on the way to Jerusalem. We're going to take Jerusalem to keep it safe for the pilgrims. We're going to take Jerusalem to help Constantinople. We're going to take Jerusalem so that we can see the places where Christ was without fear of our lives. Okay? I would make the case to you that the Crusades are not inspired by Christ in the sense that the Pope promised salvation for anyone who answered the call. Right? If you answer the call of the Crusades, you will be saved. It's essentially the same thing that the Muslims are still doing today. Just so you know. The Muslims are saying if you die in service to jihad, that is the only guarantee you have of being allowed into their version of heaven. Right? That's the only guarantee. Other than that, it doesn't matter how good you are. It just depends on what mood Allah is in when you get there. I'm dead serious. That's the only assurance of salvation is if you die in service to jihad, which is the holy war against their infidels, which is us. Right? Yeah, and the Jews. Anyone who's not Muslim is an infidel. So yeah, Jews too. Okay, so they answer the call. The first crusade, called by Pope Urban II, is extremely successful. Okay, Constantinople, the emperor here, he offered to help provide them logistics. So by the time that the first crusade is mostly French knights, by the time that they get down to here, they get a fresh batch of supplies, and then they start working their way down to here. Okay, the first crusade caught the Muslims off guard. They were not ready for that. They were not ready for that fight, that style of fighting. The Muslims wear very light armor, they're very sensitive to the heat, right? And here come all these medieval knights dressed in plaid, chainmail with heavy armor, with plates and all these other things. And the Muslims are not used to that at all. They're using like wicker shields, right? And they're mostly just wearing cloth. So they could not handle the heavy knights of Europe when they got there. And it was a problem for them for actually several hundred years that they couldn't really deal with the heavily armored knights. Go ahead and pull up the map of the Crusader states for me. So once they get there, oh man, is that the one with all the pretty colors on the computer screen? Because it's not pretty colors up there. Find the colors. It is? No, that's bad. I can't really see the colors. Okay, when they get there, they are successful. They catch Islam off guard. Islam can't handle it. They also hit a fractured Islamic state. The Islamic nations, the tribes are fighting each other, and here comes this army of 20,000 Europeans down here to fight. Okay, so Godfrey, I think, is look up the leaders for me. Tell me the names, the leaders of the First Crusade. I know Godfrey's one. Most of them are French, right? Most of them are French.
What are the colors? The colors up there now?
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
What are they?
Okay, so each of these colors are actual nations that were set up by the Crusaders. These are called the Crusader states. Okay? These nations would last over 100 years in that area. They would be there for that long. You think about that. That's 2-3 generations, especially during this time when people were dying really early, when the plague is running around. Okay? So, of course, usually what gets most of the fame is when the First Crusade captures Jerusalem. They decimate the city, they kill everybody in it, right? Again, we talk, and you always hear about how terrible that is, how bad it is. Yes, I agree, killing every man, woman, and child in the city is bad, not Christ-like, don't do that, bad idea, right? We also need to understand, Islam had just done that all the way over to Spain, and all the way over to Baghdad, and all the way up to Constantinople, okay? That was the status quo for the time for Islam. And so, depending on how you want to look at it, the Christians just kind of return the favor for what you did for all of Northern Africa and Spain and Turkey. Okay? All right. So the kingdom of Jerusalem is right here. Obviously, Jerusalem is the capital. Look up for me, Dakota, if you don't mind, pull up the flag of Jerusalem, of the kingdom of Jerusalem. This has actually been in our headlines here recently, and maybe you can see why. It's actually kind of funny. Sorry, you can pull it up on Google. You pull it up on Google real quick. So, anyways, they set up those nation states, okay? And those nation states are pretty important, pretty powerful. All right. The book doesn't really tell us a whole lot about our crusades. This is the first one right there. Yeah, that one. So that is the flag. It's called the Jerusalem Cross. And that was the flag for, there you go. Yeah, that was the flag for the Kingdom of Jerusalem, right? Now the reason why that's been in your headlines is that it turns out that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has that tattooed on his chest, right? That's why they've been all up in arms about it, right? So, but yeah, that was the nation of Jerusalem, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which did exist. Go back to our Crusader states map, if you don't mind. Okay, so the county of Edessa, that's the first one established. The Christians are very successful when they get to Antioch. They take Antioch, and by the time they get to Antioch, many of the Crusaders start to report just the feeling of, hey, we're actually in the land where the Church of Antioch was, that we've heard about in the Bible, right? All those things start to become real for them. So you got the Principality of Antioch here, the county of Tripoli, and the Kingdom of Jerusalem. All of the rest of this is still Muslim. Okay? You have Cyprus out here, which is controlled by the Byzantines. By the way, that's another thing that the First Crusade did. They did actually return some of the land that they took back to the Byzantine Empire, which is the Eastern Roman Empire. Right? So they go in there and they whoop tail. Right? They beat some Muslims, they win some battles, for lots of reasons. They would call it God's providence. Historians, most your atheistic historians call it just sheer luck or whatever. But at the end of the day, these crusader states are set up. Okay? And that happens, 1054 is when the first crusade is called. These states would last for 100 years before they start to fall. Guess what that does? That takes pressure off of Constantinople. Right? Go back out to our Google map again, or go out to Google Maps if you don't mind. So, if the Muslims are all busy fighting the Christians down here, guess where they're not fighting them? Up here. Okay? So, people, when you talk about the Crusades, people get really upset and they say, well, they were all terrible. On a humane level, yes. On a theological level, yes, absolutely. Those crusaders did not gain salvation by going on these crusades and fighting these Muslims. They did not do it. What it did do, geopolitically, is it kept Constantinople, it kept this funnel closed for at least 100 years. And of course, by the time we get to the end of the Crusades, the last crusade is actually going to go sack Constantinople. Right? So, it gets worse, right? The first one was the most successful, by far. All right, pull up our thing again, our Crusader states. Okay, at this time, once they establish that, they're like, okay, we won, we've got this, we want to go back home. Right? A lot of these soldiers did not sign up to go spend the rest of their lives in what would come to be called Outremer or the Holy Land. Okay? And so a lot of these knights were like, hey, this war's over. We've won. We captured Jerusalem. We have a king established here. Did you find out his name? Who's the first king of Jerusalem?
Can you ask me that?
Oh.
Can you ask me who were the leaders?
Who were the? Well, yeah, he's one of the leaders of it. I think. Well,
Godfrey of Bouillon,
yeah, I think that's it.
Bohemond of
The Bohemian guy, so German.
Toronto,
Yeah.
Raymond the Fourth of Toulouse,
Toulouse, yeah.
Robert the
French
Second
again.
of Flanders.
Flanders, that's northern France.
You've got, and then Baldwin of Boulogne.
Yeah, so you got the two big players that if you read books on the history of the Crusades, you'll hear about Baldwin, you'll hear about Godfrey a lot. Okay?
Tancred, Hugh of Beaumanoir,
There you go.
Robert Curthose,
All right.
and spiritual leader Adhemar of Belfort,
Yeah, there you go.
while Peter the Hermit led receiving people's choice.
That's all right. So these knights want to go back home, right? They're like, hey, we've done our job. We need to get back home. We're a long ways from home. We can't get on the airplane and fly back tomorrow. It's going to take us months of a very dangerous journey to get there. Okay? So they have a problem because now their army's ready to go back home. And guess what? They're still surrounded by Muslims. They're still surrounded by people that want them dead, right? So out of this need arises what would come to be called the military orders of the Crusades. And those military orders are the ones that you hear about all the time, right? Those are the ones that get all the fame. These are the Knights Templar, these are the Knights Hospitallers, these are the Teutonic Knights. There's many military orders that pop up from this. But long story short, we'll talk about the two biggest ones, which are the Hospitallers and the Templars. The Templars are put in charge of the temple, okay? They're put in charge of the Temple Mount. That's their job, originally was to protect that and be sure that the roads were kept safe, and this is in their own charter documents and things like that that still exist. Their job was to protect the pilgrims that were coming to Jerusalem. Okay? That was their thing. Your job is to do this, right? Essentially what the Templars did was they took the idea of the monks and the monasteries and they incorporated into it a lifestyle also dedicated to war. Okay? Does that make sense? So remember, the monks are all hermits, living in monasteries, doing all these things. The Templars are the same way. They had their own buildings that they would reside in. They had and it would just be, that's the Templar house. That's their thing. And so this military order pops up out of that need, right? Jerusalem needs to be kept safe. We've got a kingdom now, and all of the soldiers are ready to go back home, all the knights and nobles. Yes?
So this is the third generation, 100 years. The children were born there in that area. They were not born back.
Mm-hmm.
So they still want, the
this happens in the beginning.
Oh,
The military orders are set up pretty soon after these kingdoms are established. Okay. So, yeah, that's the goal of the Templars, right? And as a result of that, the Pope gets behind this idea. He's like, I get my own personal army that answers only to me? Sure, let's do that. All the nations of Europe, who would like to donate land to this new military order called the Knights Templar? And guess what? A lot of them do. Dakota, see if you can find a map at the height of its power, the amount of land that the Templars own across Europe. I don't know if you can find that on the interwebs. I'm sure something's out there anyways. But at one point in time, the Templars would own more land than most of the nations of Europe. Okay? And they answer to only the Pope. They don't answer to the kings. They answer only to the Pope. What the Pope says to go do is what they do. Right? All right. They would also get very, and this is where your Masons and your National Treasure and all your other stuff start to jump in with all the myths about the treasures and things like that. They would also develop a banking system that they would be in charge of, keeping track of the money for the Kingdom of Jerusalem and artifacts and things like that. Another really big thing about the Crusades is the artifacts, okay? They believed that they had the one true cross with them, and that was their source of power and victory, was that they actually had the cross that Jesus was crucified on. Absolutely not, right? No way. Okay, those boards would have been long gone. But, so that's the Templars. While he's trying to find out, let me tell you a little bit about the Hospitallers. The Hospitallers, I believe, are the Hospital of St. John, and their job, yes, they were a military faction, but in the same way that the Templars were also dedicated to a monk lifestyle of seclusion and like their own thing, like they did not intermingle with the rest, you know. The Hospitallers were dedicated to taking care of the Hospital of St. John in Jerusalem. So they were dedicated to helping the sick. Okay? Their job was to help the sick, help the wounded, those types of things. Also, they were also a very powerful military faction. Okay? So the military, when the king of Jerusalem would call them up, they would answer. Okay?
Only in Jerusalem?
No. In the same way, the Pope says, hey, this sounds like a good idea too. I've got my own medical system. Anybody who wants to donate land, or anybody who wants to join the Knights of the Hospitallers, y'all let me know. We'll get them signed up. We'll get that land taken care of. And sure enough, it all comes flowing in. Okay? So these two things start in Jerusalem. What is that? That's a what? Is this showing their strongholds? Is that what that is? Yeah, Aragon, Shang, New Temple, Paris Temple, Okay, that's fair. I can't read So, you can go back to the Crusader states. I'm not really sure what we're looking at there. Shows where their temples are. Okay, so now we have this new nation. We have the Hospitallers taking care of kind of medical stuff. We have the Templars taking care of protection and things like that. And another thing about the Templars, and history would show this, right? Were they some bad dudes? Yes. Did they do really bad things morally? Yes, absolutely. Are they the most elite soldiers of the day? Absolutely. Okay? There's records, like legit historical records of 100+ knights holding out for weeks against thousands of Muslims, right? How were they able to do that? I don't know. But so much so that by the time that by the time Hattin happens, which is when the First Crusade is really demolished, Salahuddin, who is the leader of the Muslim coalition army, whatever you want to call it, his main goal is to wipe the Templars off the face of the earth. Right? He does not want them to exist anymore, ever again. And so for the Templars, no prisoners, no captives, doesn't matter how noble they are, how much money they're worth. Instantly, if you see one, you kill one. Also, any Muslims under his command, if you could murder them in the streets, do it, right? Very much like a zealot type deal with the Jews during the time of Jesus. It was that against the Templars, okay? The Templars are known for their extreme military power, okay? The Crusader kingdom is going to last as long as it does because of these military powers, these military orders that show up. Okay? The Teutonic Order, they don't need a whole lot of talking about, but the Teutonic Order is the German Knights. Okay? East Germany, and they deal a lot with kind of the Polish and Slavic pagans up in the eastern part of Europe at the time. Okay? And they would also, just like the Templars and just like the Hospitallers, they would kind of become their own faction, their own state, if you will, answerable directly to the Pope. Okay? So when the Pope calls the First Crusade, it's extremely successful. He gets all these kingdoms that now answer to him, that now pay tribute to him. He gets those military orders. We just talked about the big three, which are the Templars, the Hospitallers, and the Teutonic Knights, who answer directly to him as well. And yeah, all of this is here. Okay? That's 1135. So, we'll pull out that one. And let's talk about the end of this. Or when this starts to collapse. Which is, so 1094 is when the first crusade, 1054 is when the first crusade is called. Okay? When when Jerusalem falls back into Muslim hands, is going to be shortly after the Battle of Hattin, which took place in 1187. Okay? So, for mathing purposes, 1054 to 1187 is what, 130 something years? 133 years? Yeah? So for 133 years, those Crusader kingdoms would be there. Alright? Okay, now, this is the point where I'm going to tell you how terrible a job they did, but it is a movie that does kind of encapsulate the end of this era of the Crusades, the end of the first, they call it the First Crusade, but by then we're dealing with 2 or 3 generations from the First Crusade, okay? It's really the fall of these kingdoms and the beginning of the fall of those kingdoms. There's a movie called The Kingdom of Heaven. Absolutely terrible movie in the sense that it tries to make the hero of the Crusaders a 21st century agnostic that believes that Muslims and Christians are equal. Right? That's the hero of the Crusaders that they put in there. It's terrible. And they also swap the names around a whole lot. None of the names make any sense. But it does follow the events of the fall of these Crusader states, starting with the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Okay? So, at the time, there's a king of Jerusalem. His name is Baldwin IV. The Muslims have decided, they have finally stopped fighting each other, and they have united, and they have decided that we need to get these Christians out of here. We need someone who can lead us and do this, right? That guy's name would be Salah ad-Din, okay? If you talk to a Muslim, he's one of their greatest heroes, right? Second to Muhammad, right? According to them, he never lost a battle. That's not true. He did lose a battle. He lost a battle to Baldwin when Baldwin was 17, I believe. And that battle was called, give me a second, let me Google it. Somebody else wants to Google it, that'd be fine too. Montserrat. There we go. Montserrat. Did someone say that? No? I know y'all had to look at your phone. Okay. The Battle of Montserrat, okay? And the Battle of Montserrat is one of those crazy, crazy battles. Baldwin IV is a leper, okay? He has leprosy, right? And the Muslims consider leprosy a curse from Allah, and they also consider it an instant condemnation to hell, right? So if you have leprosy, not only are you outcast, very much so like they were during Jesus' day, but it was also seen that as soon as you died, you were cooking in hell for the rest of eternity, no matter what you did. Just to put this into perspective, the Battle of Montserrat was 500 knights. Many of those would have been Templars, Hospitallers, and Teutonic Knights against 20,000 Muslims. You hear that? Against his army of 20,000. Those 500 knights broke that army and won the field. Okay? How do you do that? I don't know. I don't know how you do that when you, what's that number there? How much are you outnumbered? 20,000 to 500. Is that 40 to 1? 400 to 1?
41, yeah.
40 to 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're outnumbered 40 to 1 and you win the day. And it's not that you have a machine gun and they have sticks. You have a sword and they have a sword. Right? So, again, Muslims will absolutely deny this to this day. They'll say that battle never happened, or it wasn't really a victory, it was a retreat by Saladin, he was never defeated, so on and so forth. They really, sainted that guy, or whatever they call it, I don't know. But anyway, so Baldwin beat him at the age of 16 years old in that battle. And then, there is a problem that shows up later on, and let me see how old Baldwin is by the time he dies. Because he had leprosy, he did not live very long. He was actually considered a very good and righteous king of Jerusalem, and he had established peace between Muslims and Christians in the area, right? And that's one of the things that the movie does actually show decently, is it does portray him as pretty historical. Okay. Do what? He was 23 when he died? Okay. Or 24. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So, before his death, the leader of the Templars, who I believe his name is Renaud de Chatillon, if I remember correctly, you can check that if you want. I believe he's the leader of the Templars at the time, the Grand Master, I think is what they call the Templar leader. A lot of the people inside of Jerusalem inside the kingdom of Jerusalem, wanted war with the Muslims. They were tired of this lasting peace that had been set up. They wanted war. They knew that Saladin had a massive army out there waiting to kill them, but Saladin refused to attack them. He would not attack them. A lot of the Christian historians say, well, that's because he suffered the defeat against Baldwin, and he knew that the next king coming up, his name was Guy de Lusignan, was not going to be a strong king. So he wanted to wait and let the leprosy take its toll, and then he would attack after Baldwin died.
This says Arnold of Trumbull.
Arnold? That's fine. It's probably Arnold.
Master of Arnold of Knights Templar when King Baldwin died.
Yeah.
Was Arnold Torroja. He had it since 1181, succeeding Odo days.
Is that Arnold or Ronald? I don't know.
Arnold.
Okay, that's a Ronald. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. They're French, so it's pronounced weird. Texas, yeah. I agree.
Arnold.
It's Arnold. Anyways, long story short, this shows in the movie that they against the king's wishes, they attacked some Muslim caravans, right? And those Muslim caravans, one of them just so happened to have Saladin's sister in it, and she was killed, right? Reports say that she was raped and killed. And so, guess what? Saladin assembles his army, and he goes and he meets and gets ready to fight. And the Crusaders call up their army, and they're all set for a big battle. Can you pull up where the castle of Kerak is during this time? I believe it's, well, no, that's not it. I believe it's south of Jerusalem, but yeah, that's all Europe. Is it down here? This is, yeah, let's see, Karrak, maybe? Crusader Castle? Anyways, the movie shows this part too. Those two armies meet, and long story short, Baldwin IV, Saladin meet in the middle to discuss terms before. And long story short, Saladin withdraws his army. Okay? So it was going to boil over right there. It doesn't, right? Baldwin punishes the leader of the Templars for the raid, and from there, Baldwin would not live much longer. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. That looks like about right. Okay, that's where those two armies would meet, but no battle happens that day. Okay, Baldwin dies. Right, Baldwin dies of his leprosy. 23, you said? 26? 23 or 24. Okay. And then Guy de Lusignan will take over as the king of Jerusalem at the time. This dude is an idiot. Okay? He's bloodthirsty. He wants a battle. He wants that battle no matter what. So, and this is depicted in the movie as well, he calls up his crusaders and he decides he's going to go meet Saladin's army. Well, guess what? He decides to camp at a place he decides to go after them, and Saladin positions himself between the Christians and the fresh water. These Christians are in full armor, chainmail, marching through the middle of the desert in Jerusalem, right? In the Middle East. Like, you're talking hundreds of degrees. And here they are, in the hundreds, marching through here with full metal suits. They run out of water. Okay? The Muslims are camped down by the shore where the fresh water is. The Muslims outnumber the Christians. The Christian army at Hattin, why don't you pull up a map for me where Hattin is? The Battle of Hattin, where it took place. Yes, the Christians had a high ground. However, it didn't matter, because they're all going crazy because they're dying of thirst. Literally beginning to die of thirst. They had no water. Guess where the only place to get water was? Through the Muslim army. Okay? So, there you go. Pull up that second map. That looks like what I'm after. Make it big. Alright, there's a lot going on there. Let's see. See if I can figure out what's happening here. Yeah, okay. And actually, you can kind of see the elevation. There's an elevation here and an elevation here. It's actually called the Battle of the Horns of Hattin, right? So long story short, that night, the Muslims start harassing them. The Muslims refused to engage in direct frontline combat with the Christians because, for whatever reason, they couldn't win it. They really liked the tactics of ride in, skirmish with a bunch of bows and arrows, shooting arrows at them, ride out, right? Kind of Mongolian tactics the Mongols would use. But, however, the next day, disaster would happen here. Okay, the entire army of the Crusader states, of all those Crusader states that we saw, that entire army is wiped out. Okay, and the king of Jerusalem is captured. Right? This is one thing it shows in the movie Kingdom of Heaven, actually. He is offered a drink of ice, which, if you think about it, you don't think much about it. Ice is like whatever, no big deal for us, but how do you get ice in the middle of Jerusalem? Where does that come from? Okay, in 1100 AD. Long story short, he doesn't drink it. He gives it to someone else for them to drink it because he thinks it's poison. And he said the cup was not given to you. And long story short, they slit that guy's throat, take it outside, chop off his head, and then any negotiating power that he didn't have anyways, that was it. Okay, the king of Jerusalem is then taken captive, and from there, Saladin has an open pathway across most of the Holy Land. Okay, his army of united Muslims can go do whatever they want to do. Right. So, guess where he goes shortly after the battle? Straight to Jerusalem. Right? In the movie Kingdom of Heaven, it shows, again, they picked stupidest hero they could have picked, it was the dumbest plot ever. But it shows that Jerusalem actually holds out long enough to be able to get terms. Okay? So instead of the city being taken and put to the sword like it was when the Christians get there, the movie does everything that it can do to make the Christians look bad. Right? Makes Saladin look like the savior, hero, and all that stuff because Hollywood. The defenses of Jerusalem hold long enough that Saladin actually offers terms to the city. And the terms that they discuss here are that we can get our people out. We'll leave all the goods, we'll leave everything here, you can have the city, Jerusalem will be back under Muslim control. You let us leave. And when we leave, we're not going to go to the Principality of Antioch or Edessa or any of those things. We're going to go back to Europe. Let us get out of here. And that he honors it and he lets them leave. Okay? The fact that he did not totally destroy Jerusalem is the reason why Saladin is seen as such a noble person. Okay? Yeah. And his famous line at that whole scene when he captures Diocletian after Hattin was that a king does not kill a king, or you're not close enough to your own king to know this, right? So, anyways, yeah. All right, pull up our Crusader states again. All right, so the kingdom of Jerusalem pretty much collapses, right? And then once Jerusalem falls, he starts making his way this way, okay? Starts going this way. The Pope, seeing and hearing of the disaster that had taken place, calls the Second Crusade. Okay? The Second Crusade, same thing, same idea as the one that was launched 150 years before. Go save the Christians in the Holy Land, right? Go do what you're supposed to do. Long story short, the Second Crusade would fail. As they would come across, you pull up our Google map again. Nope. Google Maps. There you go. There would be two armies that would be formed as the crusade. They would come through here, both of them. They would come at separate times. And again, they would provision at Constantinople. And as they were going, they got ambushed by the Muslims on their way down. Both armies were defeated. The leftovers of the armies went home. And that pretty much sums up the Second Crusade. They were not even able to make it to the Holy Land before they were defeated. They were defeated in Turkey here. Okay? All right. Now, the Third Crusade is the one that gets a lot of fame in the movies. Okay? The Third Crusade is called the King's Crusade. The King's Crusade, you have three kings who come together and answer the Third Crusade's call. You have Richard of England, Richard the Lionheart, right? He's the big famous one out of it. I believe it's Philip. Let me see who the king of France is. He doesn't matter because he didn't make it very far. Look up the name of the king, the French king for the Third Crusade. And then you have Barbarossa, who is the king of the German army. Okay? The German army is by far the biggest. Some estimates put the German army in the over 100,000 that were going down there. Okay? Again, the reason for this crusade is to try to save what's left of the Christian cities in this area here. Okay? To try to save them. There's still some Christian strongholds that are holding out. Remember, sieges during this time, to take a castle, it would take years. You would encircle the city and wait for them to run out of food. And you didn't know how much food they had. Right? So it was a massive investment. Let me find this.
King Louis the Ninth,
Louis, there you go.
Saint Lucius.
Louis the Ninth. Not the 16th who gets guillotined, but the 9th.
No, the ninth.
Yeah, the ninth.
This said led the seventh and eighth crusades.
He led the 7th and 8th Crusades? Was he the king who answered the call for the Third Crusade? No. Southern Anatolia. Okay. The Germans, right? So let's talk about the German army real quick, and we'll get our facts straight here about Louis as well. The Germans are going to make it to Turkey here with their massive army, and then their king, who is leading them, is crossing the river, full armor, falls off his horse and drowns.
Yeah, I was totally wrong.
You are? Okay.
Totally wrong. Philip II.
It was what?
Philip II.
Philip II. Okay, sorry, it was a Philip. Okay. I won't argue with you because you had it in front of you. So, I'm sorry, put you on the spot. All right. So, anyways, Barbarossa, I believe is his name, falls off his horse and drowns in Turkey. Okay. His army dissolves, goes home. Didn't make it, guys. Sorry. Good luck down there. And then let me find out the exact place where Philip is going to turn around. If you want to, you can Google that for me too. Yeah, where did Philip II turn around from the Third Crusade at? Let's see. Acre. Okay, Acre. Yeah. Hey, why don't you Google where Acre is for us in the Holy Land? I think I don't know if they changed the name of it, because that was, Acre was like the last stronghold of the Crusades, the last one to fall. It's going to be much later. No, it's ACRE. I'm sorry, I set you up. ACRE. Where's Acre at? I want y'all to just be able to see it on the map. ACRU. No, it's ACE.
This spells it
A-C-R-E? Yeah, A-C-R-E. Delete the U. Gotta delete the U.
It's present day Israel.
Yeah, eight.
Yeah, there you go. Is it still there today?
It says it's
Is it still
present-
called Ocker today? No?
It says it's present day Israel, like in the northern district.
Northern District of Israel. That's gonna be really hard to find it there, but. There you go. Hit that. Boom. Alright, back up. Zoom out some. Keep going. You're way down. Oh, stop. Okay. So he made it here, right? This, and zoom back down again. Sorry. Do you see why this would be the last one to hold out? See where it says the old city? What is it? It's a peninsula, isn't it? Guess what? It's extremely hard to besiege. A peninsula if you don't have control of the ocean, right? So that's why Acre would be the last city to hold out. Anyways, so Philip made it there, and then he's like, hey, you know what? This crusader life is not really for me. I'm out. And so he turns around, goes back to France. Okay? That just leaves Richard III, Richard the Lionheart, and his English army are the only ones that are there to try to retake Jerusalem. Okay? Richard and Saladin have, and remember, Saladin's still the commander at this time, even by the time the Third Crusade gets there. They have several skirmishes, but the English have something that the French knights did not, and that is a longbow. Okay? English longbows. Remember how I told you the Muslims fought? They wouldn't engage the heavy knights in hand-to-hand combat. They were very hesitant to do that because the knights would just crush them, right? Well, they would ride up on their little horses, not full-grown horses like the Europeans had, little short horses, and they would shoot bows and arrows at them, right? Well, guess what? You're now going up to an English longbowman who has a bow that's this tall and enough stopping power behind it to knock you plumb off your horse, right? While killing you, okay? So, all those skirmishes that Saladin was used to, the way he was used to fighting the Crusaders before, wasn't working out so well. And so, in many of those skirmishes between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, the casualties on the Muslim side would stack up, right? But the difference is that the Muslims can easily replenish their ranks. The Christians cannot. For each Christian, each Crusader killed, they're months at best away from getting reinforcements. So long story short, word comes to Richard that his throne back home in England is under threat of being taken away. And so he decides that this whole thing needs to stop. And so he makes a peace treaty with Saladin, and the treaty allows Jerusalem to stand under the control of Muslims. However, Saladin promises that Christian pilgrims will not be harmed as they go there to visit the place. Right? And so that is essentially the peace treaty. Richard gets on his boat and takes off back home. Okay? And that's where Robin Hood takes place and all that. He doesn't actually make it back home. I think he's killed in northern France before he makes it home.
So the Acro is changed to the AKKO.
Ah,
It's current now.
another good Muslim name change for us, huh? Yeah, how about that? Yeah, they were definitely not going to let it stay as Acre, right? As what the Crusaders had. Okay. Okay, so those are your big crusades. Go back to Google Maps for us. Another crusade is launched after Richard returns home. The Fourth Crusade is going to be called up by Innocent III. Again, this crusade is to retake the city of Jerusalem. And again, it's not just taking the city, they're trying to reestablish that kingdom that existed. And they would be defeated by the Ayyubid Sultanate, right? They would not be, that was not a successful crusade. And then, I think it's the Fifth Crusade. Let me find out which crusade is the Children's Crusade. Yeah, right after the Fourth Crusade. So, this here says it's not papally sanctioned, that's funny. So they come to the conclusion that the Muslims would be conquered by the innocence of children. So what they did was they called up a bunch of kids, they had a bunch of kids answer the call. They literally sent an army of children to the Holy Land. Well, what do you think happened? The Muslims captured them all, turned them into slaves. That's exactly what happened, right? The Children's Crusade is considered the most disastrous crusade. Here it does say it wasn't papally sanctioned, but it definitely happened, right? All right. There's another crusade to Cairo. Let me talk about that one for a moment. I guess we really don't have to. They were successful in capturing the city of Cairo, which is in northern Egypt, but they were not allowed to hold it. So, all right, let's look up the one that takes. In a second, I'm going to pull up the one that takes. Stop that. Okay. Yeah, so the Fourth Crusade, not only did they get defeated, but the Fourth Crusade is actually going to sack Constantinople. Okay? So they enter the city's gates claiming that they're looking for supplies and logistical support, and long story short, when they get there, an argument breaks out that results in the Crusaders sacking the city. Okay? The claim is that this crusade led to the fall of the city to Muslims. However, the timelines don't match up to that. So that was in 1204 that happened? And then Constantinople itself would not fall for over 249 years later to Islam. Okay, so the whole claim about, the Fourth Crusade, they were supposed to go and fight off the Muslims and hold back the Muslims, but instead they sacked Constantinople, which led to its destruction. 250 years you can rebuild the city, guys. Okay? Even if you don't got a bulldozer and a crane. So whenever you hear that claim, just know that that's bogus. Is it true that the Byzantine Empire was extremely weakened and devastated by that? Yes. But it is not the deciding factor as to why Constantinople would ultimately fall to Islam. It was not the Fourth Crusade. Should they have done it? Absolutely not. But it happened. So, okay. Another thing, there's other crusades that are called. Let's go over here for a minute. Let me look up the dates for this. In southern France, there's a heretical group called, I believe they're called the Albigenses. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. 1209, there's a group of heretics in southern France, and we'll talk about their doctrines later as to what made them heretics. We'll probably talk about it next time. Southern France is a group that shows up right around here called the Albigenses, and the Pope has deemed them heretics, and the Pope has deemed that they need to die. Okay? And so he calls a crusade to go after them. The Templars and the Hospitallers, of course, that's the Pope's own personal army. They answer the call. Okay? Sorry, my mouth's really dry. They go there, they kill them all, wipe them out, and do all those, normal things that happen. However, there's a problem that happens about a generation later from that. Yeah. we'll use those words at this time. The Crusaders pushed and put down the heretics, I guess you would say, through the Pope's bidding, whatever you want to call it. Long story short, they would stay there in that area and continue to try to snuff out this heresy that's going on. Okay. Long story short, they killed a woman for heresy, burned her at the stake, and she had a son whose name just so happened to be, let me find out his name. I think it's another Philip. I'm just saying. Yeah, it is. It's a Philip the Fourth. Okay? So we run into another Philip, right? Long story short, the woman had a son, his name was Philip, or would become Philip the Fourth of France. Okay? As a result, he watched his mother be burned at the stake by the Templars, so he also decided that the Templars needed to be destroyed. And at the time, France was, this was a very, very powerful guy because of all the intermarrying and all this stuff. He was not just the king of France, but he's also like also the ruler of Burgundy and all these other different nations because of the intermarrying and all that stuff going on with the bloodlines and monarchs and all that mess. Okay, so long story short, Friday, October 13th, 1307. And yes, if you say, oh, it happened on Friday the 13th. The reason why Friday the 13th is considered a taboo day is because this happened on Friday the 13th. Okay, so there's your bit of useful history that you can know for now. Okay. Yeah, so on Friday the 13th of 1307, Philip issued an arrest of all Templars across all of France. And he had manufactured all these lies about them engaging in homosexual acts, actually is one of the big ones that's there, and treasonous acts of them trying to take over, the kingdom of France and murder people and do all this stuff. They pretty much established that all of his claims were total hogwash, that none of them were real. What he really wanted was he wanted them dead and he wanted their money, right? Remember, they were their own banking system, okay? The Templar order would become, and so would the Hospitallers, would become literally their own nation, if you will, with not so defined borders, where they had their servants back home that would work on the fields, they would have their peasants that would work in their land and in their fields back home. They would then send the food to the Holy Land to supply them. They were completely independent, right? They were their own thing. And they answered only to the Pope. A lot of the kings of Europe did not like that. But anyways, he orders them all to be arrested, and then as a result, they are all going to be burned at the stake. Okay? So in 1309 marks the end, 1307, that's really kind of the official end of the Templar order. Okay? To talk about that for just a second, the Templars, guess who doesn't like the French very much? Let's just do it this way. Come on, who's the arch enemy of the French for hundreds of years plus? English, that's right. So when Philip sends out this order of, hey, all the Templars all across Europe and the Pope's with me, they all need to be arrested and burned alive. England's like, we'll get right on that. So they kind of don't really good, they kind of drag their feet a little bit, and so some of the Templars are able to find refuge there, and they kind of disappear from public life there, right? And of course, your modern day Freemasons are going to claim that, oh, well, those are our people, right? We became them later on down the road. And the historical record is not there to show that, okay? So just have fun with that if you will, without getting too far off on the weeds about that. Hey, it's 6:13. Y'all are doing good, Pat. Just look at that. Y'all made it over here now. That's Stephen over here asleep and the kids asleep.
There's how many crusades at 7, 8?
There's a lot. Yeah, and not all of them are to Jerusalem, right? And not, by the way, pull up you're good enough. Some of the crusades are up here. And some of the crusades are over here, right? So this idea really catches on when the Pope's like, hey, I can call up an army of 120,000 people anytime I want to and send them after whoever I want to. I like this idea, right? But yeah, the numbers vary. But if 8 is the number you're pulling up for the most, I would agree with that, yeah. They're crusading up here to kill the Slavic pagans up there that are in all kinds of mess. So, now we'll talk about the Teutonics and we'll talk about what happens to the Hospitallers later on as well. The Hospitallers are going to find shelter. Where's it at? Scroll down on this area. I think it's right here. You scroll down. Oh, there it is. They're going to find shelter on Malta. Yeah, which they would hold out there for a very long time. Okay? All right, questions? I won't let y'all ask too many because I know we gotta go. We just write it down, same for next week.
Well, I have one, but it may be.
No, go for it.
The schism between, the Catholic and the church, what's that?
The
Great Schism?
yeah, the Great Schism, I believe it is around 1054.
So that was about the time the Crusades started?
Yes.
And that's when Constantinople and Rome split? They split?
They were already separated. Like the Orthodox, they wouldn't be like officially split, but Constantinople had the patriarch and Rome had the pope. That makes sense?
Okay.
So they're already sort of split.
So
1054, the formal break of communion between the Western Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox.
right around-
That's 1054, they're already separate, but that's when the Pope would be like, yeah, those guys, they're heretics.
But they still helped each other when the Crusades started.
Yeah, because it was essential to their survival against Muslims.
And so is that the Greek Orthodox that are?
That Eastern Orthodox, yeah.
Eastern Orthodox?
1054 is the official date. And I believe, and we can talk about that next week if we want to, but that's going to be over a big deal of icons in the church, right? The Catholics are very much about their icons and pictures and all these things. The Greek Orthodox are like, no, we're worshiping idols. We're not about that. Is there more going on than just that? Of course, right? There's power plays and politics. The state is so wrapped up with politics and religion are so intermingled that it's very hard to separate them at this stage. Your bishops at this point, they're not just people who take care of areas of the church. They're highly sought after positions of political power. Right? Like the nobles, it was a good thing if you were a lord and you could get your son to be a bishop. Right? That was like a sought after thing. Go do that. Yeah. So there is a really good movie about the Crusades. It's not in English. It's called Arn. It's a Swedish film. It's really good. It covers the life of the Templar, who actually is one of their national heroes. Yes, go.
What's your take on the present Masonic beliefs versus the past Templars?
Hey, you're going to get me in trouble.
Well, there's so many in my family.
Yeah, so modern Masons versus the old Templars.
Correct.
Not the same. Not the same.
Because the ones, I mean, the ones that I call family, they're present within the beliefs in God. And
They're present in what?
their beliefs in God, like they're,
Yeah.
So, what's your take on it?
On Masons? Or on
Just
the Templars?
Just the relation between the two.
Oh, you're going to be in trouble. The doctrinal statement of the Masons, and you can go find this yourself. The doctrinal statement of the Masons says that they're willing to accept any religion except for exclusive religions. In other words, religions that exclude other religions.
Correct.
Christianity, true Christian, us,
Yes.
we are exclusive. We don't say that Muslims are going to heaven.
Right.
We don't say that Buddhists are going to heaven.
Only one way.
So, now, that's their doctrinal statement. How much they adhere to their actual doctrinal statement, I don't know if it's, like if there are Catholics that believe 100% what the Catholic doctrinal statements say, I don't believe that they're Christians.
Okay.
But I do believe that there are Catholics that are Christians. They
Okay.
just don't believe what their doctrinal statements say.
Okay. Yeah, you answered my question.
Yeah. Are there Christians that are Masons? I would probably say yes. Should Should they be Masons? Do a lot of praying about it. How's that?
I did, right.
Before I get fired. As far as their ties to the old Templars, it's not there.
Okay, that's,
The historical record is not there. Now, they claim to have this secret knowledge and all this stuff, and maybe that secret knowledge that they refuse to show the rest of the world proves it, but if you're not gonna show the rest of the world, then I'm gonna have to say there's no connection.
no correlation, no.
Yeah. Now, I know that the Masons have a, I don't even know what you call it, I have zero involvement with them. A branch you can go into called the Templars, I think, like, I think you could, if you're a Mason, you can go try to be a Templar today, or something
Well, I
like
mean,
that.
you can absolutely get tried for Masonic charges, I mean, within the, you know, the lodge and everything else. There's a whole different judicial system within.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about the Templars themselves, like people who saw themselves as continuing this military order to answer to the Pope in the defense of the Temple of Jerusalem, which is, by the way, which is today the, what is it, the sepulcher? No, what do they call it? What do they call it? What's it, huh? Yeah, the most holiest site in Islam that's on the Temple Mount, that is,
Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
that's what we call it as Christians, what do they call it as Muslims? Yeah, Google it for me.
So are you also familiar with who the Eastern Stars are?
Yeah, that's the female branch of the Masons, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's about all I know about it. No.
Dome of the Rock or Al-Aqsa
Who's
Mosque.
the Dome of the Rock? Muslim.
This Dome of the Rock is
It's
the
probably the Dome of the Rock. I lost my mind.
7th century Islamic shrine on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem's Holy City.
Yeah, the Dome of the Rock. Yeah, I lost my mind.
Known as the Golden Dome.
Yeah, it is the Golden Dome you see when you see the pictures of it. Just so you know, just to bring it forward to Revelation, to set all that up, right? If the temple is going to be rebuilt, guess where it's got to be rebuilt? Where that mosque is. What do you think that's going to do with Muslims? I don't think they're going to be too happy about that. A Jewish temple being built where one of their most holy places are. So you can see how it immediately sets up the stage for going to war with Jerusalem, right? So, what's that, Brother Alonzo? I know I got you fired up right there.
You know, they're talking about building the temple right next to that, the Wizard Rock.
Oh, they got to build it where it is, man. They got to build it on that.
The rock where Abraham's foot is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, we good?
We're good.
I'll let y'all go early so I can hold you all over tonight. All right. Next week we will cover the final fall of the Crusader states, the last cities to die off, and we'll cover the fall of Constantinople and what happens there. Okay, and the Muslim hordes start to rush into Eastern Europe. Okay, it's a big problem. They make it to Vienna before the end, which is Austria, in case you're wondering. Yeah, that place that's way up there. Okay. All right. Let me say a prayer for us, and I'll let y'all go. Well, God, we thank you for this night to come together here and just talk about what's happened in the past, and God, just try to have a clear view of the history. But God, just pray you keep us safe and protect us as we get ready to leave this place. It's in Jesus' name.